Welcome to Remarkable WAM.
We'll horse in. And there's a quiz as well.
Oh, I know, the quiz. Well, let's kick off. So, we've had a bit of a chat. So, I will formally start. Hello, my name is Chris Mills, and together with my friend Andy Reid, we are your continued hosts in our ongoing vodcast, as I like to call it. Thank you very much for joining us. This is Remarkable WAM, Wealth and Asset Management. And today we'll be hearing some more remarkable stories, activities and initiatives from a very remarkable person working in WAM and financial services. So, Andy, how are you today? Are you well?
I'm good. I'm very well. And recovering from that short technical interlude that we had before we pressed record. So we're marching on. I need to put 50 pence in the meter. But that joke no longer carries anymore, does it? We don't have electronic meters with 50p's in. And I'm looking forward to today's conversation. And actually, I'm hoping that the themes are starting to emerge now, Chris, about our continued ambition to rewrite the rule book when it comes to wealth and asset management.
Agreed.
I'm still getting energized by speaking to the pioneers out there and hearing their stories. So today is another opportunity to get inspiration about what the future holds for the wealth and asset management. So I'm looking forward to hearing from Sarah.
Yeah. So why don't I introduce her, and then we can crack on, because as you say, this is about who are some of the movers and shakers are helping, those little building blocks to craft a new industry. I will make one proviso and apologise that if anybody hears a clarinet lesson in the background, it's not me. I will blame entirely my youngest and obviously incredibly talented child.
He's too busy reading Proust at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. The older one is writing War and Peace too. Exactly. So let's crack on. So today we're joined by the delightful and driven Sarah Sinclair. And Sarah, I have plundered your LinkedIn, so you have to be, we talked about truth and honesty earlier, and this is sometimes where it comes back to roost. According to LinkedIn, you properly and formally studied computer science, and you started your career as a developer. Sarah honed her skills in project management in financial services and it's an illustrious list. I have Barclays, Prudential, Legal and General, Standard Chartered, closer to wealth and asset management, people like GAM and Schroders, amongst others. And I get the feeling that Andy, she knows how to get stuff done. So I think we will be completing this podcast in time, under budget, etc.
I love that.
However, but most recently and probably most importantly, Sarah founded Change Gap. And I'm borrowing from your website, Sarah, which is a firm with a vision to craft a stronger, more resilient financial services sector. Their mission is to help firms, regulators and technology vendors, so across the market, to better understand and reduce the gaps. I frankly support those goals wholeheartedly, but I'm fascinated to hear more. So Sarah, how are you today?
I'm really good, thank you. And it's great that someone took the time to read, and it made me feel maybe, we could just use this recording as our pitch video.
You can always edit out unwanted sections of the video, mainly in, at least my view, the top half and the bottom half, and just you would probably be perfect. But let's sorry, Andy, I'm forever rude to you.
Consistency is something that we can guarantee on the podcast. I'm interested in hearing more about this, the vision, the purpose-led element of your business.
Well,
Steph, particularly this kind of mission to gaps. So more of that later, definitely.
Because I'm going to do what I usually do, and unfortunately, Sarah, roll back the years. So start at the beginning and then work forward. So I'm going to start with the opener, which is a little bit like, when I mentioned computer science and software engineering at the beginning, When did you know you wanted to be a computer scientist? What was your motivation for that? I'm just interested.
Yeah, see, that's not really the exciting bit, because, and actually my career started before that. I left school at 16 and worked for NatWest Bank, folding statements. Can you imagine that, being a cashier? Then I went to the Halifax Building Society while it was still a mutual, and I knew then that wasn't enough for me. I just didn't know what else to do, and so I did computer science. And as soon as I worked in development, I just didn't feel geeky enough. So I was one of 6 females on a 200 strong class at university, and by the end there were just 3 of us.
Really?
And then when I went to work in development, I just didn't feel geeky enough. So you'd get in the morning, everyone would say, "How was your evening?" And the guys would say, "Oh, I downloaded the latest version of this game and I played it all night." So coding during the day wasn't enough, and but I was also really interested in the customer side of that development, and really delivering for the customer. So that led me out of doing the development and doing analysis and then project management, and even right up to now, and especially now, that technology background has really served me well, because you understand the full life cycle. You can talk in that language and be a bridge between tech and business. So yeah, interesting path.
And did you, I mean, it looks like you dabbled in areas outside financial services. Did you purposely target financial services, or was it a bit of serendipity and then you kept going? How did that work?
Yeah, so it was serendipity. So so before that I worked for Microsoft, a telecoms company, for when the deregulation came in. So some of the second tier telecoms, and so I developed a billing system for a second tier operator, and they started with 3,000 calls coming off their switch. And very quickly that became millions, and that volume issue, was a real test of my skills. But fascinating and a great place to be in at that time. And then shipping. So yeah, quite a few before financial services.
And this is a tough question. It's almost like a job interview here, but this is a bit unfair. But
I hope I get the job.
Well, I haven't even described the job. It might not pay very much. I'm interested. So when, how would you describe your project management style? What makes your project your project? I'm just interested. Can you pick on anything?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, actually, Chris, because there's so many frameworks, methodologies, textbooks, courses,
Six Sigma,
templates, rules, waterfall, agile, blah blah blah. Yeah, but I honestly think yes, they are helpful and you need them, but I always say it's as much about knowing what to use and when, as when not to use those templates or to stick to the framework. And that's down to judgment. So it's personality, mindset, energy, experience, and that judgment. Relationships are key. So you've got to do the best for the customer. You've got to deliver when everything else and everyone else is failing for whatever reason. And especially when the budgets have gone well over, the time is critical. There's no backstop. You've just got to get it in. What do you do? And you get all sides of project management. Some people who are very forceful and even potentially bullying. In my book, that's never the answer. So you need the strength of character. You need a tool set, but above all, you need mindset and energy. So that's myself.
Can you pick on any project that comes to mind that you had, that was a lot of fun, or particular particular high? I'm just interested, anything comes to mind?
See, that's a really interesting question as well, because for the last 10 years, I've pretty much just done turnaround, and I wouldn't describe them as fun. It's a nail biting, and you're going in when everyone's tired, disillusioned, frustrated, relationships broken, and so on. The majority of people are just trying to do a good job, but it's so big that it needs one person to pull it together and to encourage the good things, fix the bad things, pull it all together. And that's not really fun. But what is fun and really good is towards the end, and then at the end, seeing that turn and seeing the difference it makes to people, the people who've been working really hard, the leadership who've been feeling frustrated and so on, and seeing that turn. But along the way, I do actually try and have fun where you can, because a lot of these things, if you're doing the right things in the right way, that saves time and it creates time to have fun, because if it can be fun, that's great. And there was a time when I was working in a particularly stressful place, and we were in a big open plan office, and I'd brought in a small team to get things in, and when the people from the previous team used to walk past, they sort of always looked over with this curious look on their face, and then you would hear murmurs, and then they actually said, "What is it about your team? Why are you sort of enjoying it? And getting on well, and so on." And I think that's what it comes down to.
If Chris and I are I'm not going to say, Chris, we're at the start of our journey to rewrite the rule book around wealth and asset management, because in truth, it's been sort of circling around our minds now for several months, almost years. And we're in that phase where we can sense the people and the opportunities are in front of us. And we're at that kind of stage. And we're going to go on that big adventure with people like your good self, Sarah. So I just in case we have a power cut right now and we lose the podcast, it would be lovely if you could give us 2 or 3 pieces of advice about how to manage an unknown project in a particularly regulated and restricted area where there's lots of inherited rules about what can and can't be done. And thinking about all of your experience, turn that into just 2 or 3 pieces of advice and encouragement for us now. And then we'll put that on the wall in our real or virtual workspace.
Okay, so it's like in the film Home Alone, when he comes up with his roadmap, his game plan.
Yes.
What would be on that?
What's our Home Alone roadmap plan?
So you always need the right people. So you need excuse me, you need to generate that sense of trust. So have the right person at the lead, sponsoring it in the right place, right person managing it day to day. And when I say right person, they have to create the right team and keep that team going, a lot along the way through all the ups and downs. Because when you get the low points, that's when you need people pulling together. So if you've got people that so you don't want a blame culture, you don't want a fear culture, you don't want people just sticking to their rules and methodologies and not playing the team game. So you need that person at the helm who's going to encourage all those behaviors and lead the team through. So leadership, unfortunately, is often missing because of fear or politics or lack of team spirit. So that's number one. So it's people. Number 2 is plan. This is one of my favorite topics. It sounds really boring, but my personal view is that people think planning is really easy. And that's one of the issues. So, if you're running a 50 or 100 or 500 million plan, or even a 1 million plan. It's tempting just to kind of list out some activities and work streams and off you go. But it's a bit like a process map. You have to think of the unhappy path. You have to think of those potential issues that might hit. Not overload it with warnings and cynicism and all of that, but just enough thought about how that plan might play out and how you can de-risk and put the right control points in, milestones. So it's a whole topic in itself. Could talk for hours on it, but just planning, you need the right plan that people have bought into, and you can respond and keep that plan as it should be all the way through.
So that harmony of people and plan, and there's an element there I've chosen to infer, which is plan will be the overt systems and processes and instructions and activities to follow, but the people will bring that behavioral dynamic and the decision making and the ability to flex. So we could talk out of this podcast long into the night about projects that have gone to plan or not. Right, bring that back to wealth and asset management then, Chris, because we've got to remind Sarah of our mission and mine her for advice and insights.
So that was an interesting.
Actually,
go on.
You said 3 things, and the third thing actually is really, I don't know if that should go first or
memory.
Purpose. What's the purpose of the project, right? What you're trying to achieve, and having that really clear, and then tying everything to that. So again, when an obstacle hits, or if there's a change to the plan for whatever reason, you can go back to that and say, well, is that change okay, or what's the impact on everything else? And if we make this change, are we still going to hit our purpose? Is everyone bought into that purpose? So that's a really key thing to have clear.
That's a perfect segue, because my point was, after all these ingredients we've talked about, software development, project, you understand how to bring, small, medium, large and gargantuan projects together and deliver that. Where did Change Gap spring from? What's its purpose? And can you describe its plan?
Yeah, so it sprung from all of that experience, and having worked at the very smallest and the very largest firms, and thinking actually it's all the same. It's all same but different. So it doesn't matter if it's the smallest or largest, if it's a asset manager or a bank or insurer, it's actually all the same, people, planning, purpose, and having seen so much go wrong, and so many issues, and so much waste of money, time, and people's energy and well-being, I would say, because it really does impact people at every level. It was that sense of there has to be a better way, and feeling that I had something to contribute, and not just myself, but connecting people and ideas, and having a collective impact.
So we talked about, in the preamble earlier about, you've got a blend of consulting, and expertise that you're bringing to bear. But actually, I think, part of your plan and strategic direction is actually to start to create the right tools to be able to use. It's a product or a solution. So how would you describe that? What's your, how does that help change financial services?
So the plan, it's interesting actually, because in this startup journey, a number of people have said, so Sarah, that sounds great. Have you got a plan? What's your plan? And I've proudly been able to say, yes, of course I've got a plan. And it's been really interesting doing a plan to myself and to the team. And so, I deliberately kept it high level. So it's a roadmap. which then gives you flexibility if you need to pivot or change for whatever reason, but still, you can achieve your purpose. But I'm glad to say we've stuck to it. So, and in terms of consulting product, the plan is to develop the capabilities and the proposition around that in both areas, and create a strong foothold and then scale that, because we really do have a strong ambition. We don't want to just do something small. We want to do it in a scalable and sustainable way, because that will achieve results on its own for us and clients we help, but also we hope actually it will inspire and share the practices and the learnings with others who are doing similar things. And I think it's quite unusual for us in that we're not just a consultancy and we're not just a vendor. And we're finding that actually being both is a great advantage, because some tech firms don't have that business or change capability, and they're very much reliant on either external tech providers to fulfill their idea, take it to market, to develop it, to take to market. And consultancies also, their clients typically want tech solutions. So then who do they partner with? So we're in a good position that we can either, be the other part of either consultancies or vendors, or be both. And for a client, that's potentially a really powerful and effective proposition.
And how, Andy and I talk about this in the past, with describing these concepts to our mother, in brackets, who isn't the chairperson of Barclays, end of brackets. And I'm just wondering, how would you describe, you talked to us about being a reg tech. What does that mean, and what are you bringing? What would my mother understand about that?
Well, I imagine your mother is very different from my mother, and I have tried to explain it. And I would like to say, I would like to think that it's not my explanation that's preventing my mother from understanding, but I get the principle. So describing
it this week, it's okay. We'll quiz her after.
Just describing it simply. So in terms of consulting, the explanation is providing help, basically. You're filling a gap. So a firm may have people who do this stuff day in and day out, but they're trying to look after the business. So if they want to do something big or out of the ordinary, they need to bring in that help. But for the product, so RegTech, it's about providing technology, so a solution, a product, in a space where you can't rely on manual spreadsheets and manual processes, and large teams. It's just not sustainable, especially with the increase in regulation and scrutiny.
And would it be fair to say, in simplistic terms, that regulatory scrutiny that you mentioned there, that helps the end consumer, because then they can be certain that it's safer, that it adheres to certain standards, that there's quality involved. So, I guess for Mrs. Miggins and her pension, regulation is a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, so regulation is interesting, right? So there's a part of it which is about protecting the consumer. So, for example, better AML, KYC solutions, to make financial services safer. That's a good example. But then if you think about regulatory scrutiny on firms and the reporting that they have to do to the regulator, that's about making sure that we rely less on spreadsheets and manual processes and people. And one key example is actually not relying on people to hold vast amounts of information about legal and compliance interpretation of regulation. but having it in a tool, so it's there 24/7. It's consistent. There's less ambiguity. So that's one example.
And in addition to Chris's question about areas that safety, standards, quality in the context of regulation, outside of that, Sarah, what other areas do you believe are ripe to be challenged and ripe to be made better in the near to midterm future?
Yeah.
What areas do you think have sort of inherited some needless or sluggish processes, and they could be inside that Mrs. Miggins doesn't need to know about, or they might face into Mrs. Miggins, but what's your sort of sense of opportunity to innovate in the future?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. So there's a sort of backward looking answer and a forward looking answer. So backward, there's lots of areas. I mean, process efficiency, or so in firms, the amount of time that's spent creating and maintaining documents, from portfolio management, and I'm talking actually in the change portfolio rather than asset management portfolio, but I'm sure there's opportunities there as well. But right across the operations, there's lots of manual processes and so on that would be ripe, for automation. But and in general, I think there are lots of products out there. It's not for a shortage of products. I think there's a shortage of good quality and lean products, so not feature bloated. So, for example, our product, we've deliberately kept it as small and tight and lean and simple as possible, because that's actually all you need. You don't need to justify, you don't need to put in thousands of features to justify a price, because then that costs more to maintain, and who pays for that? The client. So that's one area which I think improvement could come.
That's interesting. So it goes against the grain of what one could expect, which is, well, the more I pay, the more I want. I need to justify the cost and the value by seeing evidence, and as you said, think that could lead to things being feature bloated. But it's interesting. There might be a trend for less is more. Keep it simple. I would rather pay a little bit more for elegance and simplicity.
Exactly.
Rather than all the bells and whistles, like one of those ghastly graphic equalizers from the 80s.
Rather than just what you need. And I think in general, digitization of documentation. So if you're doing a change project, even you go through the classic production of requirements documents, functional specs, test documents. That should be digital. You shouldn't have to create mountains of documents and SharePoint and so on. And I know there are agile systems that kind of do this, but it depends on the scale of the program. But I think there's lots that could be done there. But future, forward looking. So the really, really exciting thing that we're seeing and trying to get into is ESG. Sustainability reporting, and again the two key pain points that we're seeing both in regulatory reporting but also ESG is, number one, simplicity. That's going to help everyone from the retail to institutional investors, regulators, the end consumer, the poor end consumer that always gets kind of forgotten in the excitement of everything we do day to day. And explainability, so comparability. So there's not a shortage of people and vendors creating, capturing, reporting data, but how do you choose from those hundreds of providers? And there's lots of standards out there that they are trying to be, convergence is a key area there. But until that happens, there's a lot of confusion. And if we're going to save the planet, if we're going to have reliable reporting and a reliable sense of, are we improving and are we reaching the targets for climate change and other measures, diversity and inclusion is another key one, then we need better reporting at the aggregate and, at a level where you can compare and really trust the information.
So I was going to I'll pick on one thing that you just said at the end, which I think is really interesting, and tying it all the way back to your course, where you, as you said, you ended up being what, 3 of 100 or 200 folk, 3 women on the course. How do we, why do we need more women? Let's just pick on a very pertinent example in RegTech. Because you're part of you're on, is it RegTech Women? You're in a grouping there as well.
Your research is great, Chris.
I can read. It's just trying to make sense of it now, which is often the hardest bit. But I'm just interested. I think there's several massive reasons to include more women. I'm just, what's your perspective on the other side?
So I could be really cheeky and ask you first, because I'd be curious, but I can go first if you like. But
I'll have
I
to
think
first if you want to invoke.
Oh, go on then. Yeah, because I'm curious.
I think you talked all the way earlier about projects that work. And you talked about leadership, and you talked about plan, and you talked about purpose and the team. I think that women foster a greater sense of teamwork. I think a mixed team works better. I think I've always liked fostering diversity of thought. And how do you get diversity of thought if not through diversity of gender, culture, geography, etc.? I don't always agree in that there's no such thing as a stupid question, but I think that I love that boiling pot. And on that point alone, I think we're missing a trick. We're massively missing a trick not to include vastly more women in all aspects of financial services, let alone RegTech. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. And it's an interesting one because having worked so long in financial services and so from my computer science degree and then working many years in financial services, it just was a reality that it was a male dominated area, and it didn't really bother me per se. There were examples where I did suffer and not very pleasant at all. I actually even thought of leaving the industry at one point, but really glad I stayed. I think I thought, why should I leave? I didn't want to waste that experience that I've got, but I just got on with it. I didn't kind of make a thing of it. But then it was actually someone who said something to me, and it made me think, even if it hasn't been an issue for me, and it probably was, I probably was just trying to survive through it, make the best of it, and so on. But despite that, to me it felt that I should be more vocal about it, or try and do more to influence the future for my daughter and the future generation. And I go back to that point about whether I thought it was an issue, possibly denial, and I actually think that is true. And it's not the fact that if you only have guys, they do a bad job. Of course it's not. I think it literally is diversity, and it just works better when there's a mixture. So it's not even male or female or any other type of diversity. It's just that mixture that makes a difference. Because and it's the dynamics. I think it just creates those dynamics. And then if we consciously make an effort to get a better balance in all areas of diversity, then you're de-risking the future.
Mhm.
And to some people it seems like a mountain to climb, that that's just too hard, but you've just got to start from somewhere. And then keep going, because otherwise it will never change.
I mean, I entirely agree with you. I'll ask you, Andy, about other sectors in a minute, because you work across, not just financial services, but there are some things that are indefensible, aren't there, where people are doing the same job, and too often I've seen the woman paid 10% less than the man, and that's completely indefensible. So the pay gap is clearly important. I think what's interesting about all of it is the more transparency of that data, and you talk about regulatory reporting. It's making plain in a simplified way. Then you can do something about it. I think the more of that will happen, I think that's a very good thing.
Yeah, that's right. And there's another thing where, regulation is complex, reporting is complex, but I think people can fall into the trap of thinking, if you've got a complex thing to resolve, then the solution needs to be complex to justify, if you see what I mean. And that's, so, and that's one of the messages we're trying to get across. Is actually the opposite. You need to break it down and then, tackle it with a simple solution to cut through that.
I mean, Andy, on that diversity point, do you, the dabbling that you've done through me with financial services, etc., do you, we're quite skewed, aren't we, as a sector? Others are much more balanced. Do you think, Andy?
I'm thinking. So was that to me, Chris?
Yeah.
I'm looking at. It's a bit male heavy, the financial services sector, and the point that Sarah was making about diversity of thought, I again agree with. That said, I want to add to it, so because it could become a platitude, couldn't it? We need diversity of thought. So to put that into context, thinking across all of the different sectors that the team and I have worked in, one of the themes that emerges is, after a while, regardless of what the organization does, if it's become stuck in a rut, it's because it's started to innovate and project manage in the same way. So tell me about your last project, Sarah. Well, we followed this steps A, B, and C, and we ended up with the result. Great, that's a fantastic project. Tell me what you then did. Well, we chose a new brief and we stuck the same process on it, and we followed the steps A, B, C, and we ended up with D. And you go, okay, that's 2 for 2. Tell me about your third innovation project. Well, we identified the brief and we followed the same steps. So after a while, even the folk get into the habit of maintaining the same creative process or the same innovative process. So immediately injecting different people into the early stages of a project will force people consciously to think about the chosen process. I think it forces people to think about the chosen behaviors. And to Sarah's point earlier, what's our purpose? And is this team really going to challenge itself to get to that purpose? So diversity of thinking will be attached to a better management of the process. It will attach itself to a better design of any product, and that will hold hands with gender, cultural background, identity, sex, etc. It's important because it will directly benefit the creative process. So there we are.
I think the other angle that you mentioned on as well is ESG is a very interesting topic, because I think it's caught the imagination of the consumer, because ESG is the industry term that encompasses sustainability. You jokingly said about Save the Planet. Well, Greta Thunberg and Attenborough, etc. That's exactly what they're doing. And I think that with that increased transparency, there's an onus on the financial services to be attuned to that. And how better to serve the consumer than increasingly to engage the 50% that we've done really bad at employing. You know, I think you get more in touch with the consumer if you involve more people like the consumer.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, actually, Chris. I think we talked about this in one of the working groups, and you know, I said a little while ago about, you know, the poor old consumer that gets forgotten. I mean, yeah, going right back to my days at Halifax, the staff used to moan, "Oh, you know, the customers this, the customers that," and you know, it's a case of saying, well, if it wasn't for customers, you know, you wouldn't have a job. And but they do get forgotten. And you know, the conversation we had was around the fact that with the social media now, and just I think everything that's gone on in the last 10, 20 years, there is a sense that people have had enough, and things need to change. And so, you know, whether you call it people power, I think the phrase was society will increasingly punish firms that don't get it right. You know, so IT failures or control failures, AML failures. So the regulators, you know, putting more pressure on. But I think people will also, you know, have a big say. But the thing is, they can't, or the limit to which they can have a say, you know, is dependent on the information and the reporting they have. And, you know, we have a role in helping it be more explainable, more accessible.
Well, it's still digressing slightly, but it still strikes me as strange, and this is, you know, a man who's been in the industry for over 20 years, that, you know, we purchase a fund and therefore have some minuscule ownership over a particular company, and yet we allow the fund manager to vote on our behalf on our issues. And I think that 80% or more of people don't understand that's what they've done. You know, they've bequeathed their voice to an unknown fund manager. And that doesn't sit right with me anymore. You know, I'm not suggesting it's an easy thing or we should, you know, just click your fingers, but you're a part owner. You should have part of an owner's voice.
Yeah, and from what I've seen and heard, that is an aspect of you know, the asset management industry, which makes it harder around regulatory reporting. You know, it's a question of who should do it, who will do it. So the more clarity around that there is, the better, I think.
There's a you mentioned it earlier, but in the intro around project design and people and process, part of that Agile manifesto talks about the pillars of a good project. It will be transparency, feedback, and inspection. And if you've got the ability to look at all information in all real time and give feedback upon it, the theory is you'll make better decisions accordingly. And I wonder if those principles can't be a thoroughfare between the wealth and asset management ecosystem and Mrs. Miggins or Mr. Miggins on the street. I wonder what's your take on that, those principles?
Actually, can you explain that again? Because I got the bit about the transparency and the information around Agile, but what's the link with Mrs. Miggins?
Right. So that my bad. So that was ironic, wasn't it? That I was trying to be as clear as possible as well. So within behind the scenes of a project that or could be sitting on the Agile manifesto of transparency of any and all information associated with the project, inspection, the ability for all members of the team to see everything, and therefore have the third ability to give feedback on it. That should lay the foundations for better decision making, which would lead to better ideas and better products and services. At the moment, my belief is, or my insight is, there's a lot of decision making, to Chris's point, that goes on behalf of the consumer, where the consumer doesn't have access to all of the information. It's a bit of a siege to request and gather information that you want, and even then you're not quite sure if it's timely or relevant, and there's no opportunity for someone on the street, a consumer on the street, Mr. and Mrs. Miggins, to say, hey, we would like a voice here. So is there something that could bring all of that gap closer? Because again, you talked about right at the start, Sarah, you're filling the gaps and closing the gaps.
Yeah. That's a really interesting question. I think that's can be answered in two ways. So there is a thing around transparency of information around projects and change. And I was talking to Trevor about this because and it was really interesting because I always describe it as a pyramid with three levels. And level 1 is your exco board, senior management. Level 3 is the people working really hard to make change happen. But there often seems a gap in that middle layer. So you've got loads of status reports and information about what's going on at the bottom. You've got some very perhaps nervous or frustrated leaders at the top saying, I'm spending all of this money every year, maybe 100 million or more. What am I getting for that? Or, for this key critical project, are we okay? Are we going to make it on time? And that gap between level 1 and level 3, it, means, they're just in the dark. So there's a lot that can be done there. And that's definitely right, for automation, but it's all about what data you capture and how you tie it up and so on. But then I think, the other point about Mrs. Miggins is, it's interesting, isn't it? Because most projects or change have benefits management, but who benefits and who makes the decisions about if a firm is going to spend X million a year, do they get a slice of that, or is it making their life better? Is it safeguarding their pension or investments better? But we can't answer that question unless there's better data. Yeah. So I think there's definitely scope.
There's definitely spaces to explore there, and I want to go back to what you said earlier about but you solve it by not bloating things with features. So you keep things elegant and simple.
Yes.
That's why I'm scribbling away here.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Talking about elegance and simplicity, it's quiz time.
No.
It's quiz time. What I want to see in future, Andy, is a lot more excitement.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Quiz time. We need a jingle. I'll dig out some Casio keyboard now and press demo mode.
This is supposed to be a relatively entertaining interlude that you both enjoy.
Yeah, it is.
We will enjoy it. We will enjoy it.
Bring that segue in again, Chris. Let's just imagine we're a minute in the past. Okay. Thank you, Sarah, for that last insightful comment.
No. So back to corporate bullying. You will enjoy this.
Right. Yes. Great. No.
So here we go. Now, just to set the scene for you, Sarah, there are merely 5 questions, and they are all multiple choice.
Okay.
And as I think I explained to you in the preamble a little while ago, earlier this week, they're biased towards your own CV and lifestyle, etc., etc. Andy, of course, has a disadvantage, but he's been doing this for a while now. He should be reading through the tea leaves and working.
I should be reading everybody's profile on LinkedIn. I should be going to the library and getting every type of book.
Well,
yeah, come on.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. Question 1. Which of these is generally regarded as an object-orientated computer language? Are you ready, Andy? Is it Python, Logo, COBOL, or Fortran? Would you like a clue?
Yeah, sure.
So I've got one of each type. I've got an algorithmic language, an education language, a business language, and the object-oriented language. So just so you know, so it's object-oriented. Is it Python, Logo, COBOL, or Fortran?
And do we shout out the answer, or should we write it down?
Well, I'm the final adjudicator, so I'm going to, if you can give me an answer, Andy, because otherwise you'll get a clue. Because I'm pretty sure that Sarah's.
Well, I've heard of Python, but I don't know if that's object-led or algorithmic. See, so Cobalt. C.
C, is that right? Okay, C, excellent. What would you go for, Sarah?
Yeah, I fear embarrassment here, but it was 26 years ago that I did my degree, but I would go for cobalt.
You go for cobalt as well. Okay.
Ooh.
I know. Are you ready?
Right.
Second question.
Yeah.
According to the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report in 2020, how long will it take the global gender gap to close on average? And they do this through regions and countries. They put it a sort of a year assessment, and the average, I haven't done the calculation, but it looks to me like it's probably the mean or the average of those numbers. So is it A, 54 years, B, 71.5 years, D, 99.5 years, or D, 163 years? None of those numbers is a good read, I would argue. So, Sarah, it's up to you. So the global average, 54, 71.5, 99.5, or 163?
100 and the
last
biggest
one,
one.
163. Go for it, Andy. What are you after?
I'm going to be optimistic because this isn't fatalist. We could change these numbers tomorrow, people.
Good one. I like that.
71.5. Yeah, because 163 years. That I'm not going to bother doing anything. I'm not going to go and rattle my tin and shake a shelf. 71.5 years.
71.5. Okay.
But I would want to make that 5.4 years.
It's horrific, isn't it?
Yeah,
anyway, question 3.
Yeah, okay. Either way, that's a depressing answer in that part of the quiz.
However, I'm very glad that it's in the World Economic Forum and we're raising interest here. So,
yeah, come on.
Question 3. Sarah, you have worked at Legal & General. You have a famous umbrella logo. What 4 colours from left to right are on that umbrella?
Ooh.
Yes.
Oh, that's mean. That is.
Ready? Are you ready? Now, this might be hard. You might need to jot something down. Is it red, orange, yellow and green? Red, blue, yellow and green? Blue, green, white, red? Or, this is such an unfair question. Or black, white, black, white?
Red, blue, yellow, green.
Red, blue, yellow, green, which is B. Andy, what would you go for?
The same. Can I do the same?
You can do the same. You can do the same.
I've drawn little brollies. Look, and I have. Hang on. I can be red.
Are you seeing what looks aesthetically pleasing?
Yellow, green. I thought it did have a black. There's definitely a yellow in it. Orange. There's no orange. Red, blue, yellow, green. B, please.
Okay. Question 4.
Yeah.
According to a number of independent reports, I surveyed 2. RegTech is booming and actually reached $6 billion in 2020 in valuation. What is the projected growth rate over the next 5 years, rather than the end number? So it's the compound annual growth rate, the CAGR for that, just for those that know. Is it? I have to look, Sarah. I have to speak to Andy like this. It can be very.
I feel like I'm in the corner of the classroom, Sarah. Every now and again, facing the corner to think about what I've done.
I mean, it's just a power trip, honestly.
Dear.
Anyway, is it a growth rate of RegTech? Is it 1 to 5%, 5 to 10%, 10 to 15%, or greater than 15%?
I would say greater.
You think greater than 15%? You're on a D, are you? Andy?
Me too, but just for tension, C, 10 to 15.
Tension. Excellent. Good.
It depends. You see, it depends which where you researched. Are you using Bloomberg data or?
I can't tell you that. You just Google it. that is tantamount to cheating. That's just
Hands away from the keyboard, Sarah.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. This is all done on trust and transparency. So do remember.
Oh, dear.
Okay. Last question.
Yes.
Andy, this is your hot topic. This is one of your favourites. You ready?
Oh, is it? Oh, soups of the Middle Ages. Yeah, go on then. Here we go.
The General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR,
yeah.
gives EU residents the right to access
Yes, it
what
does.
any organisation knows about them and how that information is used.
Yes,
Okay.
it does. Yes.
I know the question.
You ready? You ready? In this specific context, what is a DSAR?
See, I knew what the question was.
Did you?
Yeah.
Well, so you're guessing last on this one. Is it A, document storage and retrieval, DSAR? Is it data summons and response? Is it data subject access request? Or is it don't speak about Russia?
That's good.
But they're listening right now.
Yeah.
They're listening right now. There's going to be a knock at your door, Chris.
You can't speak about them. What do you reckon, Andy? Do you want me to repeat? Is it
The C,
what data subject access request?
the data subject? No, it didn't.
Or is it
A?
what document storage and retrieval?
No, because then that wouldn't be because that's just a protocol, isn't it? What was B?
B is data summons and response.
When I worked in a bank, you had to do all that online training every few months, and the GDPR, when I found it, if I pressed F8 enough times, it would whiz through, and I'd get to the end having passed my GDPR in minutes. So I'm convinced this was a multiple choice question. I'm going to C. There you go. C. Document summons and request. C.
What would you like, Sarah?
Data subjects access request.
Okay, which is C. Are you ready for the answers?
Yes.
Are you ready for the answers? Okay, here we go. Which of these, in brackets, according to the website that I read, is an object-oriented language? Python.
No. Sarah will degree as well. Shame on you.
Dear. Oh dear.
So I remember learning Logo, and that's education. That was the forward 50, right 90.
Yeah. And there was a little triangle that went around and
yeah,
that one.
yeah. COBOL, it says, is a business oriented language rather than object, and Fortran is algorithmic. I also learned a bit of Fortran.
Oh dear.
Well, Sarah, we're
Fortran 77 was that Pascal?
in this quiz.
I will return my degree certificate.
Send it back.
But Sarah, do you know what? I think you've moved on. Honestly, I think you're more likely to get an honorary degree and a doctorate than anything else. So don't worry about it. Honestly, it'll be fine. Question 2, which is interesting about the Global Gender Gap Report. The actual answer is 99.5 years. So neither of you are correct there either. The other numbers I picked were
Right side.
54 years was Western Europe. 71.5 years was South Asia. So I'm guessing that's the likes of Singapore and the like. And then I think 163 years East Asia and the Pacific. So when you average these things out, it comes to 99.5. Legal and general umbrella. Are you ready?
Yeah.
You were both correct. It was red, blue, yellow, and green.
Well done. Well done, Sarah.
Question 4. RegTech is booming. The sacrificial lamb that is Andy Reid. Yes, it was in fact D. It was greater than 15%, but in the spirit of sacrifice, Andy went for diversity and guessed C, and wrong. So, well done, Sarah.
Well done, Sarah.
Yeah, and because I read a Bloomberg report that said that by 2025 it would be worth 55 billion. So that's why I was thinking 6 billion must be, you know.
Oh, I saw 27.5 and 20 or something, but look, either way, I mean, that's a massive growth.
It's a lot. Yeah.
You know, the top CAGR I had was about 23%, but that Bloomberg is probably nearer 40 or something ridiculous. So
yeah, and I would hazard a guess that was calculated before the whole ESG thing became.
Yeah, no, you're probably right.
It's starting to look,
Last question. GDPR regulation, a DSAR is in fact, you're absolutely correct, a data subject access request. And so therefore we can in fact talk about Russia. So according to my sums, 2-1 to Sarah. Congratulations, Sarah, winning.
Well done, Sarah.
Thank you.
Post quiz, I thoroughly enjoyed playing against you in the spirit of sports, the winner.
Teamwork and, you know, just collegiate.
Well, in this case, I applaud the gap because I actually think that it made all the difference to me. So 3-2 to you.
Thinking on that one. I like the visual question. We all had to access a little bit there. Yeah, I like the legal and general logo. Maybe there could be more logo-based questions.
We could do that. I think I might do a what does this smell remind you of? We could do that one as well. So back to the last couple of minutes of the discussion. Sarah, I'm going to finish with 3 of my typical questions, ending questions that I've asked every guest so far. You know, we as a summary of what are some of the big targets you have for 2021? What are the things that we should know about that you're working on, a big initiative that Change Gap is delivering, or, you know, what's 1 or 2 things that we should be well aware of?
Yeah, so having a purpose agenda at the heart of the business, that means we need to, if we're going to make an impact, to help some key initiatives, and they are diversity and inclusion, skills gap, workforce of the future, and mental health in the workplace. We need to make profit. So we would obviously like to sell product and consultancy work, A, you know, because that's what we're here to do, but B, to complete that mission. And everything we do, it's not even about just meeting those goals. It's about inspiring, setting you know, blueprints or ways of working, best practice, and inspiring people and bringing people together. So that's all of those things all fit together. So, you know, promoting open source, you know, doing things better, more fairly, you know, they sound all like common sense things, but to me, they feel like some of the things that have been missing culturally and could make a huge, huge difference. Okay, so there's enough work to go around. You know, vendors, you know, don't have to have big, complicated products at really high prices that, you know, some firms can't afford. So there's a lot of equity gap, if you like. Not only between firms who are trying to do best for their customers and suppliers but also to the end consumer. Yeah. And
I've already seen some of the output you've been sending out on LinkedIn about, you know, the workshops and the you know, the discussions you've been having, which are fascinating. So more to come, please. Is a request.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and no, the thing I love about it is, yes, it's good for us to build our profile and create a community and so on, but it's equally good for anyone else, like you and anyone else who's involved. So I've only had 1 or 2 people say to me, yeah, but, you know, that doesn't seem right, you know, because you'll benefit. But I say, but so will you. And that's where the open source and the fact that the challenges that face the industry today are so huge, no one can do this on their own. And, you know, Bank of England, for example, their 10-year transformation initiative, they said they need to be inclusive, and they are being inclusive. And So if we can all sort of take a bit of that mindset and propagate that, then, you know, I think we can easily achieve a lot.
So leads nicely probably onto my second question, which is the final tricky question really, which is, you know, given the industry where it stands now, is there something that comes to mind that you think we should stop doing? Or is there something that we should start doing or initiate? You know, I'm thinking about two sides of that coin. You know, I don't mind which side you pick. I'm just interested. Do you anything come to mind stop doing, or we should start doing and make mandatory?
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, ecosystem partnerships, trust, all of that I think is critical to, you know, remove barriers and to open up, you know, the opportunity to do better and to do better together. But I think, you know, the point for me is around, you know, if you think about the increasing complexity and regulatory scrutiny, the need for better governance and so on, the response to that often seems to be, you know, more complexity, more box ticking, more nervousness and fear, and more governance. Do you know what I mean? It just, you make the problem worse. So a lot of, you know, the things I talk about and the way I do things and the team is about helping people to see the difference. You know, you can achieve your goals, you can make the regulator happy, you can be compliant, you know, you can do good change by actually doing things more simply, and less is more, literally, you know, because if you have too much governance, too much box ticking, you actually forget what you're protecting, which is counterproductive. And I think, you know, and I say that because I think governance and regulation is set to increase. So it will be a disaster if that doesn't change.
No, that's fascinating. Andy, before I ask my last question, have you got anything that you'd like to end with?
Yes, I'm a fan of alliteration, Sarah, and my notes all have P's. So I've really enjoyed hearing your stories and your points of view. And we've got, my takeaways are purpose, plan, people. I've written purity with a dotted line to products and propositions.
That's good.
Not feature loaded and bloated.
Yeah.
Simple. So purity. And finally, planet. So all of those 4 P's should have a positive. There's another P. Hooray! Another positive on the planet. So sustained, inclusive, diverse, and sustainable. So thank you, Sarah. I hope you become part of our remarkable journey, and I hope that you've enjoyed your first conversation with us.
I have very, very much. Thank you so much. And you know, I hadn't prepared hugely, so it's nice. You know, the format was really good. Yeah. And can I say one last thing? You know, around diversity, I think one of the challenges is that some people get a bit, not offended, but, you know, they say, well, but things have changed a lot, and no, you know, it's not bad. But the thing is, there's a lot of perspective on that, and I think until it's really better, and until you don't have to talk about it, if you like, that's a key measure, then you have to keep going. And that is uncomfortable for some people, but it's really difficult to get the balance right. But I think, you know, it's possible in terms of the way you do things, the way you talk about it. Yeah, so I think that's the difficult thing. A lot of good progress has been made, but it's like change. You know, you make a big splash, and then the harder bit is ongoing. And I think that's the same for diversity, you know, especially.
So I guess my last question related to that then is who should we invite onto the podcast next that can help reinforce some of those messages? Who would help to do that, Sarah? Who would you recommend?
Can I take that away and think about it? Because there's a few people, and I'd like to.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. You can dodge the hook and the blatant attempt to secure another great guest in a very overt way, but we can tackle that later. And I'd love to talk to you about that issue of diversity and you know, my perspective as a, you know, as someone in the majority. It's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, and I think
topic.
yeah, that's a good thing, isn't it? Because I've got a handful of people in my mind, and so even that's a good sign because people are talking about it more. And I think